everyone. We're so happy to have you here for our final program of the season, and we're already working on plans for next year. And I'm Becky Hogue, and my parents started this program when we used to be in the Methodist Church, and we're so pleased to have been in the library since it was built, and that they co-sponsored this with us. And Kristen, my partner in planning, Kristen Schultz was in the room anyway. And today my husband Mike is our videographer, because I'm pleased to say that Barb Mabs is scuba diving. And it's a wonderful thing that she does periodically, and it's so wonderful with her, allows her to move in the water, so she just thoroughly enjoys it. So that's where Barb is, and assigned it over to Mike today. And there's Kristen in the back. So anyway, I have on the back my clipboard. I always do a little bit about, if you're not on my email list and would like to be, Kristen's showing it in the back, just sign up and I will send you our notices monthly, and in August we'll send a notice out about what's coming up for next season. So I can't believe we did all these programs and an extra one with Marnie, and here we are, the anxious generation, and I think a lot of us are. We know about it. And so Kathy Hubbard and Linda Sullivan were teachers at Storm School. I have to get it because I know my Nelson people and my Storm people and Gustafson. So this is their book club read this and they thought it would be good to present. And after waiting all these months, here they are. So I will, without further ado, introduce, Kathy's going to start, Kathy Hubbard, and then Linda Sullivan. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. I have to share a few tidbits of information with you. I was so excited to be here that about an hour ago, I tripped over a rug in our hallway, smashed my face into the floor, bled everywhere, and my husband said, "We're going to the ER," and I said, "Oh no, we're not. We're going to Books Between Bites. We'll go to the ER after that." So if I look a little black and blue, you know why. Secondly, I would like to say that Linda and I had read this book quite a while ago, and we thought it was so interesting and something that we felt everyone needed to know about. And one of our interests is brain research. When we were much younger, we were sent as part of a cadre to California to study under a pretty famous brain research expert, and we were fortunate enough to do that. It was an initiative through the school district, and we trained on brain and memory, and then we brought that information back and kind of incorporated into the way that we taught. You know, we were learning best practices in the classroom and how children learn best, and so because of that interest in brain research, we thought, wow, this book is going to be super cool. So I will say that this book is very, very interesting. It is very detailed. It almost reads like a college dissertation if you can muddle through that, but nonetheless, we think it's very pertinent. It's also been on the bestseller list of the New York Times for 57 weeks, which is a long time for a book to be there. So anyway, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the author, Jonathan Haidt. He's written, I think, 6 books now, all in this particular area. He doesn't write kids' books. He writes, he's a researcher, a writer, a lecturer, and a college professor who has an interest in cultural, moral, and political psychology, which are the basis for the books that he's written. He's 61, and he's currently a Thomas Cooley Professor of Ethical Leadership at New York University's Stern School, and he has a BA from Yale, a master's and a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania. He taught in the Department of Psychology at the University of Virginia's Department of Psychology, and he spent some time researching in India. He studied cultural psychology, and he also went to the good old University of Chicago. So I'm sharing this with you so that you know that A, he's pretty bright, and B, he's done a lot of research to be able to write these books. So what I want to tell you right now about is the first part of the book, and it's entitled A Tidal Wave. It starts with a statistical look at depressive episodes starting with teens around 2012. When we talk about mental health, it refers to the anxiety, depression, and self-harm. And looking at the graph during this time period, okay, yeah, there we go. Looking at the graph during this time period, you can clearly see an upswing in anxiety and depression. The data comes from standardized surveys that they gave to teens at this time, and it was compiled by the American College Health Association. And the students taking the survey were asked questions like, have you ever had long periods of feeling sad, empty, or depressed? And have you lost interest or become bored with the things that you usually enjoy? So from the data gathered, you can see the increase in depression rose about 50% across all races and social classes. The actual wave that he refers to began in the early 2010s. So most of our information is based on the Gen Z kids and the Zoomers. And I think Linda passed around sheets that you could look at to see, because to be honest with you, I really wasn't clear on who the Gen Zs were. And so I know I'm a boomer, and that's all I know. So at any rate, it's coming out so that you can kind of compare as to where everybody is in that. As you see from this graph, the time when the decline of mental health became significant, everyone was connected to the internet 24/7, and they were running millions of apps. So instead of talking to their friends in person, we were starting to connect online. The kids were starting to connect online. And by 2016, and I realize that's a while back, 79% of teens had their own smartphones. So do you think these kids have a right to be anxious? I certainly do. The first chapter of the book is entitled The Surge of Suffering, and it begins with comments from parents of the Gen Z kids feeling they've lost their children when they attempt to monitor use of cell phones, which I know can be very difficult, and it has a disastrous impact on the family. The girls in 2010 seemed to be on social media platforms on their phones, while the boys were more into digital activities like video games, YouTube, Reddit, and sadly pornography, which I'll talk about a little bit later. With all of the new virtual activities for kids from 2010 to 2015, Haidt said that the kids were not fully present when they were around other people, so he refers to this as the great rewiring of childhood. And it changed everything. It changed role models, physical activity, emotions, social patterns, and even the sleep patterns of these kids. Interestingly, the author indicated that no one social event like COVID or the global financial crisis could explain the increase in anxiety and depression in teens. And just as a quick note, he mentions that this trend was not exclusively independent of the US, because they saw similar trends in other countries. So Linda's going to talk to you a little bit about the backstory to the Great Rewiring and the loss of play-based learning.
Right, and there's the graph about Australia.
Okay, are you going to talk about that?
No, that was...
Linda's not going to talk about this graph. This is what occurred in Australia, which I think similarly is similar to the ones of the U.S.
Okay. All right, so as Kathy mentioned, I'm going to talk about the backstory. Evolution lengthened human childhood to make learning possible. By age 5, a child's brain has accomplished 90% of its growth. Humans no longer needed to be the fastest or the strongest because we had the ability to learn, and that kept us on top. The ability to learn from each other became a key trait. So what happens during this lengthy childhood that we have compared to other animals? One thing that happens is we have free play, and the author stresses this is very important. Play is the work of all animals, but in humans we have more time to do it. We learn the skills to be successful by repeated activity where feedback is from success or failure at that play. Key features of free play are 1, they are freely chosen, and 2, mistakes are generally not very costly. Today there is much less free play. You can look around streets when you drive down the neighborhoods and you don't see kids playing outside like they used to. Contrast with social media, where play or other activities are not chosen and the feedback is decidedly different. The second thing that happens during this prolonged childhood is what the author calls attunement. And during this attunement time, that means that the children are looking at facial features, they're looking at expressions, they're learning from gestures, they're learning some social expressions. Contrast that with social media, where you pick out an emoji. Quite a big difference. The third thing during this childhood that is important is social learning. There is value in conforming to appropriate behaviors which the child learns during free play over an extended time. Social media, on the other hand, is the most efficient conformity engine ever created because it can shape acceptable behavior within hours of scrolling. I want to say one more important aspect about this section of the book, and it is dear to both of us because of our brain research that we did. We already know that 90% of the brain is grown by the age of 5, but in addition, the brain development has sensitive windows of time when learning occurs. Language is a great example. If you learn a language before the age of 12, your brain is able to make all the sounds no matter what country you lived in and what language you spoke. After the age of 12, things are pruned in your brain and you will no longer be able to make those sounds, and you would usually have an accent and couldn't pronounce those sounds correctly or the same way. Culture is very similar to this. There is an important window of opportunity to learn about our culture, and we need to make sure that our children are learning from appropriate models and not just social influencers, as we've all heard about in the news and things like that. So the next section that the author talks about is the need for risky play. We have discussed that there has been a decline in play, but why is play important? America and other countries made 2 bad decisions in recent decades. The first bad decision was that in the real world, we think of it as being too dangerous, even though crime rate has dropped steeply. TV and other forms of media show us all the violence going on, and we feel that things are really worse than they are. There is a book called The Better Angels of Our Nature. Has anyone heard of that book? It's by Steven Pinker, and he has done research that shows how violence in our world has really decreased. We all feel like it's worse now, but it's actually decreased, and he has a lot of proof in there about it. The second bad decision that we've made in recent decades is that even though we're so worried about all the violence going on now, we have not been worried about what's going on in the virtual world and what our kids are getting into. We haven't set up any guardrails for them. Unsupervised outdoor play teaches children how to handle risks and challenges of many kinds, which builds confidence. The author calls this discovery mode, which fosters learning and growth. When a child masters a skill, they try something more challenging. For example, bike riding. When a child first learns how to ride the bike, they're just learning. Gradually, they try it, go faster, they take more risk, and they might do a wheelie, or they might make sharp turns, they fool around on their bike. That builds confidence. This thrill-seeking is necessary to overcome childhood fears. Unlike the discovery mode, the defense mode has children constantly looking out for danger, which blocks development of competence, self-control, and self-management. The author had this picture. Now this is a playground equipment. When he talks about risks, this is a little too risky. He's not suggesting that the children have this. If you can see how high that is just by judging how the size of the kids, that is way too risky and that would be unnecessary. However, this is a more modern playground. If this is on a school playground, you can see that there's absolutely no risk, no speed, no fun, pretty pretty much boring. And the author suggests something called a spinner, and I didn't know it was called a spinner, but you might recall those big round discs, and they're about 1 or 2 feet off the ground, and they had handrails on them, and the kids would go around and around and run around, and they would grab on hold and then jump on top. He said that's about the right amount of risk. You know, they're talking with each other, they're socializing while they're doing it. They jump on the spinner, they jump up, they might fall, but the injuries aren't going to be costly. They're taking some risks, but it's not going to be that very costly. How many of you had the freedom to walk to school when you were young? All right. How many of your children walked to school when they were young? How many of your grandchildren walked to school? Yeah. I think if you could see the rest of the room, very few today seem to walk to school. You have probably heard about helicopter parents, those who worry about the dangerous world. Even though more parents are both working out of the home in recent decades, parents are spending more time with their kids. And that seems a little ironic that they have less time because they're working out of the home, but yet they're spending more time with the kids. There are also more activities that are organized these days. So what happened here? Why do parents feel they need to spend more time? One of the reasons is that there's been a breakdown of adult solidarity, parents working as a team to raise kids, for not only discipline, but to watch out for them. So here's a little cartoon. We've created a safe, non-judgmental environment that will leave your child ill-prepared for real life. American adults have lost trust in fellow citizens and even their own children, which leads to a loss of child freedom. How many of you have played tag as a child? Did you have a lot of rules for your tag game? Okay. This sign was actually on a playground and gave all the rules that were necessary to play tag for those children. You know, it just seems a little more overprotective than necessary. So we focused a lot on what happens when young children are prevented from having enough playtime, but now let's look at teenagers. The next important idea that the author talked about is how critical the early adolescent years are regarding brain growth. Remember, 90% of the brain is grown by age 5. We know that the brain prunes part of those neurons, which we call use it or lose it. Repeated activities lead to changes in brain structure, and they call that neurons that fire together, wire together. Because pruning speeds up at puberty, this is an especially critical time to be concerned about the repeated activities that the child does. These repeated activities are the ones that get wired. We need to provide healthy ways for kids to navigate through this sensitive time. Real-world experiences which social media doesn't offer block them instead. We talked about the overprotective adults. Their children don't have the chance to engage in adult activities in the real world. But in the virtual world, kids can choose any activity with no age requirement. The author also talks about the rites of passage and how many cultures have a ceremony to provide a step between childhood and adulthood, such as when the Mexican girl turns 15 or when the Jewish boy has a bar mitzvah. Those are rites that help them move into adulthood. We're kind of losing that because we have a more secular world. And so the author says maybe we need to figure out some ways to adjust and get into and move into adulthood. And so he, in his book, develops this ladder of from childhood to adulthood. And so you can see the different ages there. He suggests, like small chores at the beginning. By age 8, maybe you could have a phone, but not a smartphone. Maybe by 10, you could have a flip phone, but with no apps. Maybe by the time you're 14, you could have a truly smartphone. So he has a way of getting to that adulthood. Okay, and then Kathy's going to do the next part.
You know, I'm pretty sure I have a dumb phone. I have a lot of apps on it that my daughters are constantly rolling their eyes that I don't know how to use. I'm going to talk a little bit about part 3, which is the great rewiring, or the rise of the phone-based childhood. This is a part of the book that describes when the move from play-based learning moved into the phone-based learning and how it affected the Gen Z kids. So here's a short anecdote from the story that I thought was interestingly sad. In 2021, Facebook had a leak from their company alerting the public to the harm Facebook and Instagram had on teens, especially girls. Sadly, the leak showed that even though these companies knew how harmful their formats were, they were still researching ways to continue to motivate teens to use their products. Haidt showed some statistics about what happened to the years following the introduction of smartphones and what occurred. Think back to your childhood and your most memorable experiences. For me, it was playing outside until dark, or with the neighborhood kids, or walking to the dime store blocks away in downtown Chicago, in the Chicago area, with my sisters to go to the dime store to buy candy, or going up to my cousin's home in Michigan in the summer and getting out early in the morning in a rowboat to go hunting for turtles. And we didn't have any adults chaperoning us on any of this. So I guess it was risky behavior, Linda. So now we skip to the Gen Z kids and their childhood adventures with smartphones. The number of physical time spent with friends has decreased. The number of students getting less than 7 hours of sleep per night has increased. Last, many teens that have reported that their circle, this is sad, that their circle of friends has diminished or kind of closed in or decreased. And then think too about how social media changed and the platforms that are examples of it. They've got user profiles, user-generated content, networking, and interactivity. This particular shift occurred around 2010 and became readily available to everyone. So in this section, Haidt described the 4 foundational harms of the phone-based childhood. The first harm was social deprivation. The second one was sleep deprivation. The third one was attention fragmentation. And the last one was addiction. I'm going to delve into these a little bit more, just so that you get a better understanding of what he was talking about. Number 1 was social deprivation. When Gen Z kids moved away from spending time with friends and moved over to their smartphones, their time with friends dropped substantially. As mentioned in the book, kids in 2012 spent about 122 minutes per day with their friends, as opposed to 67 minutes per day in 2019. Obviously, the COVID restrictions impacted this somewhat, but many of the tweens and teens were already distancing. I also want to comment on what the author said about parents who are often on their phones when they're with their kids. Some of the kids reported that to their parents, they didn't feel as important as who the parent was talking to on the phone, and the parent was often distracted. And the parents also reported similar feelings as they were around their kids that were talking on their phones. The second harm is sleep deprivation. How many of you remember trying to wrestle your kids into bed at night, especially on school nights? It was definitely a battle at our house, but we know puberty causes a shift in sleep patterns because older kids are going to bed later and getting up earlier to start the school day. So these sleep-deprived kids, or as someone in the book said, walking zombies, they're unable to concentrate or completely focus, and all kinds of bad things can happen. Their grades are impacted, their motor skills and decision-making skills and reaction time suffer, which can increase the possibility of various kinds of accidents. If sleep deprivation goes on for too long, all kinds of health problems arise. This specific age group needs more sleep than any other, and they're simply not getting it. So again, many sleep studies have linked sleep deprivation to the phone-based childhood. The third harm is attention fragmentation. This particular harm is defined as a condition of having scattered focus where mental energy is pulled in multiple directions simultaneously rather than being concentrated on a single task. Teens today reported that they can follow 6 forms of media all at the same time. And I guess I'm wondering if they follow parental media, because I can remember with my kids saying, will you empty the dishwasher or will you clean your room? They didn't follow 2 forms of parental directions. Incidentally, these are the kids that are going on less than 7 hours of sleep a night on their smartphones, and they're on their smartphones as much as 9 hours a night or a day. Many of their phones ding when they get a message up to 100 times a day wherever they are at all times of day and night. So whatever the task may be that they're on, they rarely have 5 to 10 minutes without any interruption. The 4th harm is addiction. This final harm was right up our brain research alley because it talked about brain circuits, and it involved learning and the release of dopamine, the neurotransmitter involved in feelings of pleasure and pain. Dopamine circuits are passive and result in the brain saying, gosh, that was great, or I want more. Well, I don't know about you, but can you stop with just one Hershey's Kiss? Technology and app designers use a model appropriately called Hooked, how to build habit-forming products, which do just that. They hook the user, in this case, the tweens and teens. The model for this is on page 131. If you happen to own the book and you want to look and read more about this, feel free to do that. What? Oh, not yet. Excuse us, we're sliding to newbies here. Try taking the phone away from your child and withdrawal may set in. Anxiety, insomnia, and dystrophia, which is the opposite of euphoria, may turn your child into Dr. Jekyll. Now, why social media harms girls more than boys? Well, girls are on Snapchat, Pinterest, and Tumblr, while the boys are playing video games. And the girls are more vulnerable because they're more sensitive, and obviously they're more sensitive about the way they look. They're sensitive about their bodies and their clothes and their hair and what everyone thinks of them and their overall virtual image. This part I thought was interesting, where it said girls' aggression is more rational. I wasn't really sure what that was until I started reading, but girls are sneakier when it comes to being aggressive. They don't necessarily physically fight or brawl, but what they do is they attack someone's image on Facebook, and they spread gossip, or they turn friends against friends. And for those of you that have girls, can you see the rise in depression here with young girls, where maybe one of their friends is dissing them on Facebook, and then it spreads to a whole group and another group, and it's horrible. So girls more easily share emotions and disorders. Face it, women share things. Let's say a young girl is chatting with a friend and she's expressing to this friend, I'm frustrated, or I'm angry, or I'm upset with somebody, or I'm depressed. And then it spreads again, like I said, to their friend group. And it kind of, this reminded me of that scene from Bye Bye Birdie where they're on the phone and everybody's passing along the message. That's kind of what happens with the girls, only it's on Facebook now. So it's reaching a much broader group of people. Girls are much more subject to predication and harassment, and this is extremely frightening. Girls want to have more followers. They want to be popular. And they often get attention from unwanted male predators because they friend people back that they might not necessarily know. And I'm sure you know how potentially dangerous this can play out for young girls. I know you've read things in the newspapers and so forth and seen how dangerous this can be. So, and now we're going to move on to the boys. It says that boys have followed a different path through the Great Rewiring. The long decline of males. And males, I'm really sorry about this. It said that some of the social issues that started happening with men occurred beginning in the 1970s. And the male skill sets were being challenged by females, and the workplace became more fluid, with women taking jobs that were typically originally for men. I'm not touching this concept with a 10-foot pole, so you can read more about it in chapter 7. Sorry, honey. Boys who fail to launch. You've probably heard about young men who spend a lot of their time on computers and they don't actually venture out into the real world. Maybe they're still living at home with mom and dad. Maybe they don't have the job of their dreams or even a job. And they seem to internalize life and then they don't spread their wings as previous generations have done. And so it's kind of a vicious circle for these young guys that are failing to launch. And then boyhood without real risk. And Linda talked about this. It doesn't seem like little boys have as many scrapes and bruises as they did back in the day because they're not engaging in what we used to call, or what we would call, risky behavior. Many of the risks that they might be taking are done on their smartphones instead. The virtual world welcomes boys and the virtual world consumes boys seem to be interconnected. Actually, it all connects to the following concepts that you see that are listed. Ooh, ow. I mean, really? Okay, anyway, the boys are engaging in, as I said earlier, pornography, video gaming, and no real world engagement. The pornography is much more visual and more easily accessed nowadays. I can remember guys talking about like looking at dad's Playboy that dad stashed in a drawer somewhere or something, and it was photographs, and now it is much more, I don't even know what the word is, just much more out there and so much more for them to see. All screens and not real world play, technology, freedom, and meaningless, according to Haidt. It's not healthy for all human beings to have unfettered access to everything, everywhere, and all the time for free. And I really agree with this. This generation is less able than any other to establish real-world communities because of their savvy, techie use of smartphones. This is super depressing, and hopefully Linda will shed some positive light because I know all of you are wanting to weep right now, so.
Well, we've heard lots of the problems with smartphones and other social media. Now what can we do about it? It seems overwhelming to think about taking away kids' smartphones, like that ship has sailed because they all have them. But the author suggests that it is like a plane returning to the gate for repairs. The key is collective action. We have heard news in this, stories in the news about parents allowing their children to walk to the park and then they get arrested because they're neglectful. This kind of behavior, it becomes a trap. And we need government, tech companies, and parents to work together to solve this problem because this should not be happening. And the author gives us a lot of suggestions. I think there is a slide. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is what government and tech companies can do. And the problem with tech companies is that they don't care about the brain growth of children. They're interested in their financial best interests, and that is to limit the social, they don't want to limit the usage of social media because that's not to their financial advantage. They have consciously made the decision to use algorithms to hook users so they spend more and more time on their devices. And if you're interested in finding out more about this, about how these algorithms work, there's a great documentary called Social Dilemma. Has anyone seen that? It's quite frightening, actually, but it's really good. It's called Social Dilemma. John Haidt offers 4 ways the government and tech companies could improve the virtual world for adolescents. The first thing, they can assert a duty of care. And that's just caring about what's happening with kids and their brain growth. For example, in the United Kingdom, in 2020, they adopted what's called the Age of Appropriate Design Code. And they set out some rules about what's happening with what age groups with social media. California adopted the same exact rule in 2022, but we need the whole country to do it, not just California. The second thing was to raise the age for internet access. This seems like an impossible task, but I just saw in a recent Time magazine article, does anyone get Time? They had an article about the prime minister from Australia. He decided he was going to take on social media. He did think it was helpful for the kids. And so they now have a law starting December 10th. Australia will implement a 16-year-old age limit for users of platforms such as Snapchat, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and X. The law is the first of the kind in the world, and instead of relying on users to truthfully disclose their ages, I mean, what kid is going to say when they say, "Are you 13?" and they say, "Oh no, I'm not really." You know, of course they're just going to check that box. Yeah, I'm 13. That's what it is like right now. But what Australia is doing is they are putting the burden on the world's tech giants. They have to figure out how to prevent kids who are not 16 to get on. According to the article, it is remarkable for just how politically uncontroversial it was. The measure passed with bipartisan support and stands to be implemented no matter who triumphs at the ballot box. So government can make it happen. The third thing they can do is facilitate age verification. Tech companies have this ability to do it. Right now, they're not doing it because it's not in their financial interest to do so. And the fourth thing the government or tech companies can do is encourage phone-free schools. Another thought of Heights is to stop punishing parents for giving children real-world experiences. The next thing is what schools can do now. The author states that there are two big things schools can do using resources they already have: phone-free schools and playful schools. In a phone-free school, he gives the example of a school in Durango, Colorado, and they were having trouble with their kids, and the kids were using phones too much, and they decided that they would try an experiment and do something different, and so they had a phone-free school. And they had dramatic results that were improved. Smartphones not only interfere with learning, they also damage social relationships. And the other thing that schools can do is have playful schools. Longer recesses, open playground, and a play club. Longer recesses just mean, you know, right now the recess time has really been shortened ever since No Child Left Behind and times like that. They were so worried about the academic lacking that they shortened recess time, they shortened lunch time, and so all those have become smaller, trying to make the academic times longer, which seems like that would work. However, research shows it's actually kind of counterintuitive. Having an open playground, the authors suggest having the playground on the school grounds just open like a half an hour before school starts and let the kids play. And one of the schools also implemented a play club. The teacher was so frustrated with kids always using on their phones and everything that he decided he would just voluntarily have a play club after school 1 day a week. And they were really seeing good results with these kids just playing. They couldn't use phones, they were just playing. And they had such good results in that school with that teacher doing that, that other teachers volunteered so they could have more play clubs. There was also a project called Let Go, and that's where a school, their homework assignment is do one task. This is for kindergarten through middle school. Go home and do one thing that you've never done on your own before. So it might be walking the dog, or it might be making the bed, or whatever it is. And the students confer with their parents, they agree on a project, and then they do it, and the results were that they have improved confidence and independence. And one thing to talk about, we've talked about helicopter parents, we shouldn't blame parents for helicoptering. We should blame and change the culture that tells parents that they must helicopter. And I think that's an important difference. Another thing that schools can do is have better recess and playgrounds. Times for recess, I told you, has been shrinking. There is a growing body of evidence that suggests that recess promotes not only physical health and social development, but also cognitive development. Height has an idea to test out his idea about phone-free schools and more playtime, because I think any school administrator might think, well, this is going to be a tough thing to do, but he suggests an experiment, and he said if you take about 24 schools and you divide them into 4 groups, so one group is going to be completely phone-free. One group of schools is going to be have more playtime and more longer recesses. One school is going to have both phone-free and more free playtime, and then the 4th school would be just leaving it as they normally run. And after 2 years, see which one has the best results. He said that would be a good way to test out if this really helps. So the last chapter of the book is what parents can do. Alison Gopnik, a developmental psychologist, says the term parenting wasn't really used until the 1950s. Up until then, people grew up in environments where there were many adults to care for the children, and there was no need for an outside expert. This changed around the 1970s. You know, families became more mobile and they weren't around their extended families. Parents sought to get just the right parenting training, so they used books for their parent training. And they decided that if they took the book and followed it exactly, they would have a superior product, which wouldn't be the child. The Gopnik, this developmental psychologist, suggests that that is like a carpenter. A carpenter looks at the materials and he puts together the product and he has clear standards. And the psychologist is suggesting that a better way to parent is to be a gardener. A gardener weeds, maybe takes out the phones. They water, they might provide them with some real experiences. Oh, what?
Slides.
Oh, what?
There's more slides to that. Oops, sorry.
Oh, I see. Okay, it wasn't all on one. Okay.
And then the next one.
All right, we're not ready for that one. Okay. So let's see. So anyway, to be more like a gardener. We talked at the beginning of today's discussion about how parents needlessly overprotect in the real world, like a carpenter, but underprotect in the virtual world, failing to weed the garden. The author states that parents need to be gardeners in both the real world and the virtual world. In the book, he has specific ideas how to accomplish this for each age group, 0 to 6, 6 to 13, 13 to 18, and without getting into all the details of these lists, because there are 15 pages in the book about parent ideas, I could just generally say that what the author suggests is that you should have more and better experiences in the real world and less and better experiences in the virtual world. And then that's when so if you can't read the writing, it says, "It's been so nice getting to interact with you for this past 6 years. Here's your first device." All right, so in conclusion, I think we have all heard or read about the concerns of technology, whether for our kids, our brains, or even our financial security. But I would like to share one article with you that might calm your anxious feelings a little bit regarding mental health, because that is what the author is concerned about. In the introduction of this book, Jonathan Haidt says that research findings are complicated, and some of them are contested among researchers. One such contested bit of research was written about in the New York Times by David Wallace Wells. The article is called, "Is It Really the Phones?" and is dated May 1st, 2024. Kathy talked about and showed us one chart about the high incidence of anxiety and how it jumped around 2012. You all saw that graph just go like this. But the Wallace Wells gives 2 reasons for this big spike that you saw in that graph. At that time, around this 2012, the Health and Human Services issued a new set of guidelines that recommended that teenage girls should be screened annually for depression by their primary care physicians, and that same year required the insurance providers to cover such a screenings in full. So now the doctors are now asking teenage girls, have you been depressed in the last year? Well, you can imagine that girls might say, oh, well, the other day I was depressed about that. So there was a spike in, just because they were asking the questions, there was a spike in the responses about anxiety. And at the same time, the Health and Human Services mandated a coding change in what hospitals were required. So every time an injury came into the hospital, they now had to code it, whether it was self-harm or just an accident. And of course, making that forced choice also caused some of that spike. So researchers have found that these changes explain nearly all the upward trends in suicide-related hospital visits. And what were really flat trend lines look like mental health crisis. In addition, he says the suicide data shows the rates didn't just go up for teens, but for all ages. And there was not a change in other countries. One international review showed no change in the satisfaction between 2002 and 2018 after examining 900,000 adolescents in 36 countries. Denmark, where smartphone penetration was the highest in the world in 2017, found rates didn't increase problems on mental health. So to summarize this article, there are reasons for these spikes that Jonathan Haidt has reported. But Wallace Wells makes the point that while there are concerns about social media, it may not be the cause necessarily of mental illness. I think we all know about these concerns and should do more about smartphones and screen times, but perhaps we can be a little less anxious about the mental health aspects. So we would like to thank you for coming. Kathy and I were very appreciative that you all came out today. And if you have any questions, we'll
Not answer them.
we'll try to answer them.
So that last piece of information you just said, that was, they were claiming that was accounting for the spikes, explaining it?
Yes.
Or,
Counter.
so it was kind of taking the lead away from the office, then, so to speak.
Yes, in other words, okay. She asked the question about the article that was,
The Wells article. Yeah.
yes, the New York Times article who was contradicting the evidence and the research that the author has done.
So, yes, but is that kind of accepted then, and they're that he included that in the book, did he not?
Well, the author of the book said at the beginning in the introduction that there are researchers out there who may contradict his research.
Right.
He did make that statement. He didn't refer specifically to this article because I think the article came out definitely after the book was written. So, did I answer your question?
You did.
Okay. Yes.
I have a friend at the gym who is a 8th grade social studies teacher in DePage County. Her son is at a state university, a freshman. So she was telling me that his girlfriend broke up with him, so the mother was going to go down and spend the weekend with him. Is this helicopter parenting?
Yes, could be. Well, I think that probably is an example of it. We have to have kids learn how to, on the playground, they learn how to, kids are mean to them, they have to learn how to deal with that. I mean, I've heard stories that college professors are seeing a change in kids where there's the parents of college-age kids are coming in and saying, oh, my child didn't do well on a test. Well, this, I think, gradually the kids have to learn what life is really like, and they have to learn how to deal with it on their own, so.
That's where helicopter grandparents come in.
In the solutions at the end, do they talk about phones in the bedroom and phones when kids are sleeping?
I don't remember them specifically talk about in the bedrooms. I know that some parents are now, certainly worried about that. I know our daughter, the kids had to have, they had a charging station that was out in the dining room, and the kids had to have their phones charged. 9 o'clock at night, they had to be in that charger. They were not allowed to have them in their room. So I know a lot of people are trying to monitor that stuff, but I think it's probably all over the board what they are.
Yeah, I'm always amazed how many kids sleep with their phones. And it's like they're not on call. They're not going to get an emergency message.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Yeah, and my daughter said, even though those phones are out of the charger, she can hear them clicking off. So there are teenagers out there still using them, so yeah. Somebody else had a question. Yes.
I was curious if the author touched on any positives to children's exposure to social media. I know that a lot of teens that I interact with seem more involved and are exposed to more people, more cultures. Curious if there was anything like that.
I want to respond to that one. That's an interesting question. Just as an anecdote here, my husband is one of the founding forces of Incubator at the high school. And I don't know if you all know about Incubator, but it's basically like a Shark Tank for high school kids where they come up with these really fabulous ideas and then they present them. And one of the groups was a group of kids that got together and decided collectively that there is too much use of smartphones within their realm, within the teenagers, and so they were coming up with solutions as to what teenagers could do to eliminate, not completely, but minimize their use of smartphones. So I thought this was interesting because here's a group of teenagers thinking that, hey, this is a problem. So I don't know, I was very impressed with that. Does that answer your question? Waiting. Oh, gotta go to the ER.
I would just say that the author's point was really showing the negative, and he really didn't say these are some positive things. Are there positive things? Absolutely. I mean, technology is a tool, and we all use it. I mean, there's so many things that are so much easier, but we all know there are risks. I mean, if you make a mistake on your computer, it could be very complicated. And I think we just have to be more savvy about how we use it. Any other questions? Yes?
Yeah, I was curious if the authors looked forward and speculated what the impact of today's teenage behaviors would be on them once they got to be full-fledged adults.
I don't think he really is.
That'll be the next book.
I realize it takes time for them to go forward.
Yeah, I don't think he addressed that.
Right, it would be speculation.
Yes.
I was curious, as teachers, what's your experience been with kids? I don't know if you have kids in the classroom where they've got these laptops now, and there's so much that's online. Assignments are completed and submitted online, and I know that the kids can kind of, at least at the middle school where we are, can carry them around, and if there's any downtime, you can hop on whatever program. And I wonder, with your background with that, what you think about, if we should be concerned about that level of screen use in the classroom.
Jen, that's one of the reasons I retired, because first of all, I'm not a techie person, and it was such a joy for us to be in the classroom with our students for so many years, and then all of a sudden they're all walking around with those laptops and things, and even the kids that I tutor come with their laptops sometimes, and there's no, how do I say this? It's kind of, the creativity in the classroom is kind of lost now. And I am not a proponent of all the use going on in the school system, and I hope I don't get struck by lightning, but I'm not a proponent of all the use of the technology in terms of the laptops with the kids. I mean, they've got spell check. If they write papers, they've got something that will check their paper for them at the older kid level. There's a minimal amount of creativity, I feel, left, and the kids rely on these for everything. So technology, in terms of when I retired, I was done with it. That sounds kind of harsh, but.
I was just going to share, I have a grandson in 7th grade, and he has told me more than once, he loves the teachers that teach more than everything on the Chromebook. Because I like hearing what they say, and it gets more people involved in the interaction with the teacher and their peers in the classroom. And, I just said, when I was a teacher, that's all it was. And, it's just kind of sad, but I was really surprised that he mentioned that.
Yes.
And kind of go along the lines of the parent who has a middle school. So we're kind of a control group. We started in Batavia, and then we expatriated to France for over 4 years. So we had a in France, no cell phones are allowed in schools. None. No smartphones. We got back to the United States in late 21. Same town, same community. And we said to our children, if you make straight A's and maintain them, we will get you a smartphone and maintain the cost. They did that. I want to tell you right now, our kids, when we moved back to the United States, were 12 and 14. They all now have a mental diagnosis, whereas before they did not. And they are all being treated medically. We have tried to remove the cell phones from them. And what we've done is, and we do it often with varying results, but now they are 16, 16, and 18. And we're like the control group. That article that you cited at the end, I give it no weight whatsoever based on just our personal experience. But I went to Batavia School District and asked them, please remove YouTube from the availability of our children. And they said, well, and this is the kind of answer you get, is that they said, no, because then we'll have to do it for everyone. So now I'm wondering if there's any other parents who are interested in getting these cell phones out of schools entirely. And I'm talking about the TV school district. The more people I talk to, the more people are interested in that. And the thing is, I don't know what I don't know. I'm a graduate student, I'm busy, I have 3 teenagers. You know what I'm saying? I have so many people now who are interested in, if the school isn't going to listen to us, maybe we can do it on our own somehow to get these cell phones out of the schools, the smartphones out of the schools. In France, you had Nokia. If you had to text your parents, you had to tap 3 to 6 times to get a letter. 3 times to get a letter. But you know what? None of this existed where we came from.
Yeah, I think France shows that it can be done. You can have phones. I think the problem now is, well, we need collective action, but the problem is, around here, all the other kids have them, so of course all the other kids want them. And then the parents also say, well, how are they going to call me from school if they need me? And it's like, there used to be a way that we had our kids go to school without phones. I think it's possible, but it seems, like that ship has sailed. They already have them. How are we going to get them? So.
It's almost like a fusion of responsibility. Oh, here it is. Let's just deal with it.
And I think what you're saying is, if it can't be done by the school district, then parents have to start getting a group. I just was talking with a friend of mine, and she said, she's a grandma like I am, and she said their children are raising their grandchildren. They have a group of friends where the parents have all agreed that they're not getting phones until a certain age. And I think you have to, if things don't happen by the government, if things don't happen by the tech companies, that's what you have to do. You have to start small, so.
And to get action, you're going to have to sue. Everybody's going to have to, if you make it so uncomfortable for these billion-dollar tech industries, where that's really the only hope. You have to make them accountable.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to leave before I bleed out, but we really enjoyed having you here. It's like the cliff notes of the book, so thank you.